We'll be starting in about 30 seconds.
No, I have not. You want me to ask if there's anybody on? Oh, somebody just chimed in.
Here we go. Jeez, oh Pete.
Huh? She's not gonna be here, is what I understood. But I don't know that. I don't know that. Maybe I'm wrong. Hey, it's 9 o'clock.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to call the October 13th, 2021 meeting of the State Board of Education to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Best.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. DeLosa.
Here.
Mr. Durham.
Here.
Dr. Ernest.
Here.
Dr. Freitas.
Here.
Mr. Gastineau.
Here.
Mr. Mapes. Mr. Mapes. Ms. Moat.
Here.
Ms. Renschler.
Here.
Mr. Watts.
Here.
Dr. Jenner. We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the September 1st, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Statement from the chair. I would just like to echo the sentiments of Dr. Jenner and continue to thank all of our educators, regardless of the position that you hold, the role that you play, just continuing to thank each and every one of you for the work that you are doing with our students. Are there any board member comments and reports? All right. Public comment?
Yes, we have quite a few.
Okay.
First up, Ms. Lorena Carter.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I am a parent, part of the PTSA for Westside Leadership Academy in Gary, Indiana. And I saw on your agenda that you are discussing Indiana graduates prepare to succeed. Well, we need help to make sure that our Gary students succeed. It is in distress. We need your help. And I know you all have told us before that you don't have anything to do with what DUAB does or what's going on, but you have influence. And we are here pleading again. And we're asking you to help us. If our children do not graduate and they are on the track to not graduate, what kind of neighbors do you think they're going to be? Yeah, right now they live in Gary, but what happens when they begin to relocate to your community, to your neighborhood? What do you think, how do you think you will feel Every time you go out the door, somebody may be coming into your house because they don't have an education, they don't have trade skills, they don't have a job. I want you all to consider what is taking place in Gary. Our schools are still in distress. And we need your help. We need your influence. We need you to partner with us. It's like you all don't really care. It was only a couple of years ago when Jenner, I want to say Sandlin and Walker, they came and they did a walkthrough through all our schools. And do you know absolutely nothing has changed since then? I mean, not one thing. Other than the graduation rate is even worse than it was before. So I'm just pleading with you all to look on our city and help us with what is going on in the city of Gary and our school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Up next, Ms. Pauline Bird Atkins Tatum. Is that correct? Yes. Then Ms. Tracy Coleman will be up next.
Good morning.
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 My name is Pauline Bird Atkins Tatum, and I am the granddaughter of H.C.O. Tatum, who served as principal of Gary Roosevelt from 1933 to 1961. State Board of Education, the Roosevelt alumni want you to hear our voices. 1,321 alumni have signed to have Roosevelt preserved as a historic state museum. Why is this important? Crispus Attucks is a state museum. Ball State University has a virtual museum which talks about Roosevelt High School. And also, the Emerson 18 is very responsible. This is the late Hazel Sanders. Her son is Vernon Smith. If it was not for the Emerson 18, Roosevelt would have not been into existence. These are all the principals of Gary Roosevelt High School. This is Mr. McFarland, and this is my grandfather. My grandfather, when he assumed the principalship in 1933, William Wirt told him the following: all you're to do is keep the Negro quiet. His response, no. He knew he had a target on his back during that Jim Crow era, but he knew the Negro needed to understand value, and he knew his faith in God would help him to ensure the kids in Gary, Indiana, and Lake County, Indiana, would be successful. And he did that. He set the seed. We celebrated our marker, which was last year on the 20th. If you go through this book, all Roosevelt's success, all the way to 2020, when the doors closed. This is very, very, very important. 1947. This is my grandfather in 1947. My mother graduated in 1947. These are the faculty, students, all the activities that happened at Gary Roosevelt. Why do we need history? Because we need a museum on the campus, because this is my grandmother, the late Pauline Bird Atkins Hudson, the first female detective in Gary. I ask you, State Board of Education, to hear our call to preserve Roosevelt High School as a state museum and provide funding and resources so we can highlight contributions in Lake County, Indiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins Tatum.
Thank you.
Very rich history there. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Tracy Coleman, followed by Ms. Nikki Bird.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Tracy Coleman. I'm also a parent and also involved with the Westside Leadership Academy, PTSA. This board looked at HB 1514 and said we needed to end state takeovers. But you forgot about Gary. We're still in takeover. And looking at what we're dealing with, this article with Roosevelt, how the state wasted $22 million on a flawed takeover. And even if you look at the scores for Roosevelt with middle school, 2015-16, 3.2, 17-18, 0%. So the fact is takeovers don't work and they're hurting us. And yes, Roosevelt does need to be preserved because the fact is Gary had a segregated school system. William Wirt was a segregationist. When Indiana repealed segregation, we went from 20 to 40 schools because our other white community didn't want to integrate. But then we're left with these schools when the population left. And then instead of people having compassion to say, let's deal with the history, we're penalized, we're punished as American citizens. We're taken over. And now the same thing that happened to Roosevelt is now happening to Westside. And I'm going to start just by bringing you the lunch menu, and I'll leave it with your assistant. Bread for breakfast. Bread for breakfast. You could see it. Ultra slice of bread, mixed fruit cup, fat-free milk. Now you're going to extend the school day, and instead of giving the children more, where the community has passed a referendum, people are supporting the schools. Even though there's no money, it's not translating that our children are seeing the success that they should see. And this article over here, profits over academics. With Westside, when my son started, the graduation rate was 85%, crashed down to 58%. And you can look at the things that they're doing, that they don't understand the community, they're not listening. And even when Dr. Jenner and Ron Sandlin came to Westside, the parents told them what was going on. We typed up a list. This is what we need. But there's such almost an arrogance that even though Indiana believes in home rule, even though you can say this is what our children need, we don't get it. And even Eric Parrish, when parents said we want Apple products for our children, we got a nature preserve by Westside Leadership Academy, has some of the rarest land in the country. But then when we said, let's have an iPad so these kids can do experiments, get out of the classroom, the response is Chromebooks have a lower street value. A lower street value. You don't go to University of Chicago Lab School and see them saying, we're going to buy this equipment because of street value, but that's what we get in Gary. And prior to the pandemic, like I said, we already met with Dr. Jenner. We already met with Ron Sandlin. We told them the restrooms need to be fixed. The football field needs to be fixed. These are economic issues. But instead of it being fixed this Friday, we have a great football team. They have to play their homecoming game at another school because even though the money is there, these children aren't seeing these things being repaired. Our Westside Leadership Academy has pushed for freedom. I'm in America and I'm asking you for freedom. Forgive the debt, restore local control, engage the community, employer superintendent, designate funding to make Roosevelt a museum, operate on the funds, and make the monies available through COVID to help our children. Please, we need you to act. Eventually in America, people have to have compassion and stop treating people in this manner. Freedom.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman.
Ms. Mickey Bird, followed by Mr. John O'Neill.
Let me say good morning to everyone that is here. I have a lot of complaints. I have a lot of concerns. I'm not going to try to tackle all of this, of course. What I want to talk to you about today is being a volunteer. Now, anybody in this room, I'm sure, can stop and say, when you were in school, you can remember somebody who volunteered there. The person that I was supposed to see, Dr. McNulty, in Gary, Indiana, who was the manager over our schools, I made 2 attempts to see her in writing. She wouldn't see me, so I put together a peaceful protest, which I have been doing every Thursday since August the 19th. She still won't see me. I represent the volunteers in the school. I worked as a corrections officer, Lake County Jail, Crown Point, Indiana, 23 years. I've been retired 11 years. I'm 74 years old. Until the pandemic hit, I never missed going into schools every week talking with young people about the consequences of negative behavior, which is what I do. And now, my name is on a list that I can't go in any schools because Dr. McNaughtrey does not want me to talk to the students. I am here today because, not so much for myself, but we have parents, young parents, who have children that started kindergarten. August the 10th was our first day of school. There are parents who did not get to walk their children to their classroom. I have a grandson at Williams Elementary School. To this day, I don't know who his teacher is. I have not met her. And I have over 14,000 hours volunteer service in the Gary schools. I would be in the schools right now if I was allowed to be, but I'm not. So what about the young parents who, for the very first time, took their children to school on August the 10th? Couldn't see them go to class. They don't know who the teachers are. We are not allowed in the schools. What public school do you know of that does not allow volunteers? And of course, you have to do a background check. I understand that, but we're not being allowed to even come in the schools at all. Something needs to be done about that. We have a lot of issues. I have some very serious concerns, but I think volunteer service is just as important as anything else that's going on in the schools. We need volunteers in the schools. The teachers, the principals cannot do everything. So with that in mind, I would really appreciate some consideration being given to something being done so that, you know, the people who qualify to be volunteers can do that. That's my main concern for today, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And if I can leave this with someone so they can look over it, I'll be happy to do it, because like I said, there are some other concerns, and they are very serious concerns. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd.
Thank you.
Mr. John O'Neill, followed by Ms. Wardell.
Thank you, Secretary Jenner and Board, for the opportunity to share some educator input today regarding the dashboard development. Just as a brief background, ISTA supported several provisions in HEA 1514 last session, including the concept of dashboard indicators, preferably with locally developed metrics. ISTA has advocated for multiple measures in the accountability system for years, and locally determined indicators allow flexibility for schools to showcase both their unique priorities and strengths. ISTA has also continuously opposed the overly simplistic A to F designations that have, for years, labeled districts and schools based largely on zip code and socioeconomic status, and it's time for a change to A to F. We also continue to oppose the heavy reliance on statewide standardized assessments as a single snapshot measure that fails to capture the full range of student learning and environment. And we also, as an association, have several recommendations for the dashboard and indicator framework. ISTA proposes multiple measures, including a special emphasis on professional accountability factors, such as professional development opportunities, teacher retention outcomes, licensure rates, greater reliance on educators' judgment over test scores, resource factors such as salary increases and an adequate socioeconomic indicator, and then school climate and working condition factors such as smaller class sizes, administrative feedback, well-rounded curriculum, and parent engagement, graduation rates. I know a lot of you have probably heard us mention these factors before, but we continue to have interest in adding these to the dashboard. Along with the growth issue, ISTA supports maintaining student-level growth because it allows all students, regardless of their starting point, to demonstrate skills and knowledge. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the dashboard specifically in recent development. We do appreciate stakeholder discussions that have occurred with the department, giving our members the chance to weigh in on these changes. However, the discussions have revealed several significant concerns regarding yet another major change to state policy. Educators, particularly during the pandemic, are working incredibly hard to serve their kids in person, and additionally, they have had to adapt to many changes over the years in state standards, assessments, grad pathways, and in many cases, licensure status, and now accountability. Educators have had to shift on a dime repeatedly, and it's created a lack of stability for kids and educators. And so the timeline needs to be realistic for undertaking such a wide change. There are capacity issues at stake. Educators and counselors are concerned that this work will fall on them, adding to their list of responsibilities. And keep in mind there are shortages in both of those areas. Educators are also concerned the dashboard could end up being punitive, just as the A to F system has been to this point. And so we look forward to further discussions with the board and department as this process continues, and we will continue to give recommendations and share input. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Ms. Lardell, followed by Dr. Spangenberg.
First of all, I want to say God bless you and good morning to everybody. I'm so used to coming and everything is full and we only have a skeleton crew today, but I'm quite sure you're going to do the best job you can do. First, I want to speak on behalf of parental involvement. We're coming from a place right now where parents don't really know what's going on. I'm quite sure a lot of you don't know what's going on with the pandemic facing us, and it's not over. And a lot of parents really just don't know what it is that we have in store for their children. And it's affecting the students. You can tell by some of the news that you've heard with them destroying certain things, and I don't agree with what they're doing. But there's a lot going on right now. Mental illness is at an all-time high, which affects our special needs children and our children that are just having problems. And a lot of the parents really and truly are at their wits' end. I will come representing the Title I program. And Title I was specifically designed for low-income and disadvantaged students, and for students that were having academic problems in school. One of the criteria for Title I also was that the parents would be involved. And I just heard a parent, grandparent, who once was an officer of the law, describe how she's not being allowed to come into the schools. We're at a time right now when we need each other. We're going to stop pointing our finger at each other and join together and try to make the best of things for our students. Right now, I'm afraid and concerned for the children that are getting ready to graduate, because I really can't see in the last 2 years anything that we've really been able to really wrap our arms around and say this has been progress for our children. I know we tried virtual education, but even we're having a hard time with that. I'm almost ready to go and do like the parents say, hold up a sign and say 2 more years. Give them 4 more years. If possible, give them a free education. They need that, you know. In order for them to be able to compete in a global society, and I'm quite sure the United States is not the only one having that problem, our children are going to need more time. and we're gonna have to give it to them. Getting back to the parents, Title I law says that parents must be involved in their children's education. Thank you. And that they also must come with innovative ideas in which to help. I ask you to please consider this. Consider talking to whoever it is that you need to talk to from Northwest Indiana concerning their children, so that all children will have a better education for our future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Spangenberg, followed by Ms. Dunnham.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Michaela Spangenberg. I'm a resident of Gary, Indiana, and I help to facilitate a group called the Gary Education Coalition, which is just basically a coalition seeking to bring community members together for change, for positive change for our students. And we need a lot of change. Because, as you heard from some of my fellow residents before, our schools are in distress. What's ironic is that our schools are in more distress now than before they were taken over by the Distressed Unit Appeals Board, which is ironic. Who do you go to when the takeover itself needs to be taken over? And what we really need is parity, legal parity. If it's now no longer okay for the State Board of Education to operate takeovers, why is it still okay for DUAB to operate takeovers? And to continue a takeover which has constantly failed our students academically, and that has failed to protect our students and provide any kind of environment of safety. We have fights several times a day now at Westside, the only high school we have left after they shut down multiple of our other schools as well. And some of that has contributed to the violence that we've seen, because the kids are getting the clear message from the administration that they don't matter. They just get shuffled from one broken down school to another. Nothing changes, nothing improves. They're told that the state is there for their benefit, but they see that that's not true. And so if our adults are not taking seriously the welfare of these children, then how are the children supposed to know that they have any worth? How are the children supposed to look at each other and see that they have any worth? So they don't. We have kids that are getting shot coming off the bus. We have kids fighting the bathrooms, the bus, everywhere else you can imagine, several times a day, but they won't let actual school counselors in. They won't, I can't tell you how many community organizations have said, look, we have programs, we can help. They don't return people's calls, they're not interested. They don't deal with anyone from the community fairly. And on top of it, half of our advisory board, which is supposed to be our school board, but their powers were taken away, now is no longer allowed to meet because they claim that those people are not in those seats, but the Secretary of State records say that they are. So now we're also being disenfranchised in that way. So I know before all of you have said, well, we don't have anything to do with this and we can't help. But there's people you report to, there's people you talk to, there's influence that you have over legislation. What we need is less of Tim Brown stepping in to mess up our schools and more of people actually giving any kind of care about our students. And we need this takeover to end. We need a special election for a superintendent, and we need them to stay out of our advisory board and our school board function and allow our board to meet in full. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Dunnham, followed by Ms. Shropshire.
Good morning, gentlemen, and to the other board members that may be on listening in another way. My name is Labrada Dunnham, and I am a product of the Gary Public School System. I'm also a grandmother. First, I want to say that I do want to see Roosevelt become a museum, and because I don't want to see Gary lose its history. And when I say Gary, I mean all of the schools from Northwest Indiana have brought a great amount of history to and acclimates to the United States all over the country. Secondly, I want to say I feel that DUAB has made Indiana one of the laughing stocks of the states when it comes to education. I'm not understanding why we're paying an MGT, because DUAB and MGT, they work together. McNulty is like a joke. She doesn't even, no longer even attends the radio every Tuesday or second Tuesday, whenever she doesn't show up, and doesn't show up for anything. So to pay her that amount of money to not even be accessible to the community is just, it doesn't make any sense. Secondly, in October of 2019, Mr. Parrish came to Gary and made a statement about the students in Gary being assessed for their test, only the urban schools from urban cities, at 175% and 145%. Okay, recently we had a parent call in on the radio complaining that her kindergartner took a third grade test. So, because I had been wondering for some time, why were the urban schools and only the urban schools being assessed at 175% and 145%? And they came to Gary, Career Center, Indiana, Northwest, when they made this statement to us. And Tony Walker at that time said, do the educators of the Gary school system, are they aware of it? Do they know about this? And Mr. Parrish said no. So when this mother calls in saying, why is it that the Gary students are being given exams, state exams, at maybe from higher, of kindergarten, so a third grade test is to make sure you are for the fourth grade. So if a kindergartner gets a third grade test, then that means that kindergartner is being assessed on a fourth grade level. So I now understand what Mr. Parrish means, and that's why I say MGT and DUAB are making Indiana education a laughingstock for the United States, and they're being paid for us to do worse. I think Parrish said, the worse the Gary public school system does, the more money goes out. So that's all I have to say, and if you guys look in your notes, that was done.
Thank you.
Ms. Shropshire? And that concludes public comments.
Very good. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bess?
Yes.
Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Thank you. Consent agenda is approved.
Thank you. Under new business, we have the Indiana graduates prepare to succeed. So those who will be presenting, please come forward.
Good morning, board members. So we have a resolution that I have before you for approval. But before we get to that, we do have a brief presentation. I believe it's Jason Callahan and Ron Sandlin, and/or.
Good morning.
It is our pleasure to be able to present on the Indiana Graduates Prepared to Succeed, or Indiana GPS, to the State Board of Education this morning. I'll begin by providing a brief overview of the guiding principles and vision for our profile, and then I'll turn the presentation over to Senior Director of Performance and Transformation, Mr. Ron Sandlin, who'll go into the details of the 5 characteristics that make up the profile. After our presentation, we'll ask the board to move forward, as Mr. Murphy said, on a resolution affirming the characteristics for the Indiana Graduates Prepared to Succeed profile, and to begin our work on identifying indicators that will build out the performance dashboard. I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank Mr. Sandlin, also our Director of Accountability, Ms. Maggie Payno, and our Director of Student Pathways, Ms. Flora Jones, for the development of the profile and the ongoing conversations with stakeholders across the state of Indiana. I would like to also thank many of these stakeholders who are here today who have been involved in the process and helped us to share the information with their constituents. As Dr. Jenner has pointed out many times, this is not just her dashboard, or I'm sorry, her vision, or just the vision of the Department of Education, but the profile should be the vision of the entire state of Indiana. We believe this profile places a priority on individual student growth and development by placing an emphasis on the whole child, and equal importance regardless of the chosen pathway, whether it is employment, enlistment, or enrollment in post-secondary education. In order to address pathways to prosperity, communities will need to continue to work together strategically, blurring the lines between K-12, higher ed, and industry. It is important to point out, we acknowledge this profile and subsequent dashboard are a large paradigm shift. Expanding our focus on the development of skills and dispositions of a student, and not just a single test score, is a move away from a perceived punitive system and toward one that is aspirational through the transparent display of multiple data points. A complete profile that will provide an opportunity to have both leading and lagging data points using transparent data to ensure continuous improvement for all student pathways. We also want to acknowledge there is still much work ahead of us as we continue to work with the field to research and develop these indicators, and we view this process as an iterative process. But at the end of the day, we believe this profile will help us achieve our goals, to continue to build out pathways that students can identify with and understand how the K-12 system is a vehicle not only for a fulfilling career, but a vehicle for a fulfilling life. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sandlin, who's going to go into detail about the 5 characteristics.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Following our last board meeting where we introduced these 5 characteristics, as Mr. Callahan mentioned, the department has embarked on a comprehensive stakeholder engagement process to help inform and influence our vision for Indiana graduates prepared to succeed. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of that feedback we received, and then give an overview of how that has built out or strengthened our understanding and definition of each of these characteristics, and talk about any changes that were made based on the feedback we received. So to start, major themes in our feedback include system-wide coherence. And Mr. Callahan mentioned this, that this becomes a vision for the state of Indiana, for all of our graduates, a dynamic vision that allows individualization based on individual student skills and interests. But more importantly, and what we heard very clearly, is that this then aligns to the supports and programs that are coming out of the department to help schools realize this vision for their students, and to empower communities to engage and support their schools in realizing this vision for students. Additionally, we heard strong support for connecting the K-12 experience in a formative way and to inform K-12 opportunities with how well students are achieving after high school. Again, and I want to reemphasize, we heard time and again that this information should be used as an informational data point to help strengthen opportunities and ensure equitable opportunities for all students. Additionally, we heard a lot of support, as is illustrated in the 5 characteristics, for elevating skills and competencies in addition to the focus on knowledge mastery. And so I want to be very clear that we are not moving away from the importance of mastering our academic standards. We are just elevating the importance of these complementary skill sets that we hear are valued outside of our K-12 system, and that we hear students need in order to be successful and live a fulfilling life. And finally, we heard very clearly that we need to focus on a core set of headline metrics to avoid any unintended consequences of this feeling overly burdensome on schools and also not being able to be accessed by families and communities. So making sure that as we shift to multiple data points, we focus on the most meaningful headline metrics that give a clear picture of how students are performing towards this aspirational vision for Indiana graduates prepared to succeed, and also provide flexibility at the local level to design programming and support students to get there. Any questions or comments about the stakeholder feedback summary that I've provided so far, or anything that you all have heard in your conversations that you wanted to elevate?
Ron, one of the things that I don't want to lose sight of in this, and I understand the difference between informational and being a stick or punitive kinds of things, right? But I also don't want us to forget, though, that we need that piece that's informational about outcomes, and it's been very clear where I've been on that kind of a piece, right? But we also do need to use it, right, to know where our students are and those kinds of things. So I think we have to make sure when we say informational that it's information that's getting used in some meaningful way, right? Because it does matter where our kids end up after they graduate. I know it's a novel idea, but it does matter where our kids end up after they graduate. And I do not want us in this process to lose sight of, because if we're ever going to get away from and I'm like you, I don't want us to ever, we still need to know where students are. We need to know they can read in the 3rd grade. I've never been against that. But if we're gonna make the rotisserie of testing, it's a new term for me, the rotisserie of testing meaningful, we've got to add some things, and I would even argue subtract some things in that process, right? That then get us to what can our kids really do when they get out of school. And I just don't, I apologize for jumping in, but I don't want us to ever lose sight of that, right? Information's one thing, but if we just throw it out there and we don't ever do anything with it, then it's kind of not meaningful either, right?
And if I could, in the feedback we heard, I think that goes to the coherent system, right? That educators and stakeholders outside of education, so community members, employers, are eager for this information, but you're absolutely right. They have been very clear and unequivocal in their advocacy for a coherent system that says if you're going to give us this information, are you then going to develop programming, supports, guidance to help us take action on this information? And I think we would not be doing our job if we simply just reported out information and told communities good luck. And I am actually excited as we move forward for the work that is coming out of the department to do just that, to activate communities, to be a real, meaningful partner. And this is happening across the state, so I want to be clear, I'm not saying this isn't happening. In developing these meaningful pathways for students and creating opportunities for students to engage in the workplace or experience work-based type experiences for redundancy's sake while they're in high school, and start to challenge and force us to rethink from a policy landscape. What are the restrictions or barriers that are inhibiting that, and how can then we rethink some of the larger policy framework, right, that within which this is operating. So I think we absolutely agree, and I will definitely do better on talking about actionable information, right? It's not just for informational sake, it's actionable. We want to provide actionable information and then buttress that with clear and concise programming, guidance, and supports to help activate communities to really rethink the educational opportunities that are provided to all of our students, and also elevate the great ones that are out there right now, because it is happening. Dr. Jenner talks a lot about, I don't want to get the name wrong, but I know it's a school corporation on the western side of the state that has increased the number of students graduating with the Indiana College Core tremendously, right? That is because they fundamentally rethought their high school opportunities for kids. We need to elevate that and expand it and think about how other folks can do it as well. So I hear you loud and clear, and I want to make sure I'll definitely incorporate that into my talking points as I move forward to make sure that's clear. So with that, we'll transition quickly to each of the 5 characteristics and building out a little bit of what we learned about each of them. And so the first, academic mastery, in hearing and talking to folks, it was clear that it's not only getting the content and internalizing the content, passing the test, critically important, but also applying that content. So creating opportunities, meaningful opportunities in a real-world context for students to apply the knowledge that they're learning. And again, that's not a novel idea, but it definitely came through clear, and I think the feedback was that might not be happening right now given the current system that we have, and it's focus on the performance on the test. And then elevating critical benchmarks along the way. So really thinking about this continuum and making sure that our information that we're sending out are those headline pieces, 3rd grade or primary literacy, right? The development and cultivation of advanced STEM coursework in middle school, and then meaningful career pathways in the high school space. And I'll also give a quick slide. I'm not going to read it out loud, but we did help listen and learn about why this is important. And so we've really articulated a clear statement of why the department believes, based on the input, why each of these characteristics are important. The next characteristic, career and post-secondary readiness, credentials and experiences, has been workshopped a little bit, I believe, from the last board meeting. But I think it's important, and what we heard loud and clear is that this can't just be about a terminal credential. That is critically important to the pathway, that students are walking across that high school graduation stage equipped with a credential of currency and a path forward, a vision that they are not stepping down off that graduation stage, but they are stepping up into the next phase of their life with confidence and assurance. But that we create a holistic experience for students that includes customized coursework, right? Meaningful work-based learning experiences tied specifically to their interests and skills. So it's not only just the credential, and I think that's really important. Experiences really was elevated in our stakeholder feedback. How can we support high schools? How can we develop, and I think it's important that word develop was intentionally included based on feedback, intentional coursework for students, and create the flexibility for high schools to do just that for their individual students. Now again, I think the pie in the sky aspirational vision is an independent individual pathway for every single student, but I think some stepping stones to get there is just expanding access to additional pathways, right? And creating coherence about the entire high school experience. And I talked a lot about why this is important just in my explanation. Communication and collaboration, consistently endorsed. This is our first shift over to kind of the skills side of things. And this is kind of an example of us elevating, in addition to academic mastery and those post-secondary credentials, students need to be equipped with real-world skills necessary to be successful in their lives. And communication and collaboration was endorsed within the K-12 system, within communities, and from our workforce partners, top to bottom. And I think it's important that we help schools think about communication and collaboration, not only while students are in K-12, but what that looks like in the real world. And a lot of the conversations that we had with stakeholders was, a lot of times in our high schools, it is heterogeneous, don't get me wrong, but we're mostly grouped with kids that are our same age. We're mostly grouped with kids from our general community or neighborhood area. Look at this right now. I'm presenting to folks. We all graduated high school at different times, came from different areas around the country. So it's important that we think about communication and collaboration in the real world, not just within the K-12 system. So that's something we'll be focused on as we build out the indicators, as also build out the supports and programs from the department's perspective. And the next one reflects a shift from the first time we presented this. Initially, this characteristic was titled Hard Work, Grit, and Resilience. In organizing or in collecting feedback from multiple stakeholders, we really weren't sure if that gave off the appropriate signal, right, of what we really wanted from our students. That if you just work hard, you'll be successful. And because I think we have some opportunity gap issues within our system that need to be addressed as well. That just hard work and an equal level of hard work will not always, right, get a student over the bar. But we need a commitment, right? We need a competency, a disposition of work ethic, and then complement that with equitable educational opportunities, and we will see more kids succeed. So in shifting this, we shifted from just hard work, grit, and resilience to a kind of broader definition of work ethic. And as we build this out, we'll continue to think about it and process it. And as we build out indicators here on this one, we'll probably refine because we need to get to headlines, as we heard very clearly from the feedback. But I did want to highlight that this was a shift from the original characteristics, and it's based directly on feedback that we received, that our initial wording might have been a little bit exclusive and might not have reflected the experiences of all communities and all kids, and that this kind of provides a larger umbrella, and there's still a little bit of work to do here. And then finally, probably of the three new ones, the most consistently endorsed, or second most consistently endorsed with communication and collaboration was civic, financial, and digital literacy. And a lot of questions on how here, because a lot of schools are doing coursework related to these things right now, but there's also a lot of opportunity to be innovative in this space. But the one thing that we did here time and again, especially from our workforce and post-secondary partners, is this can't just be about concrete specific skills. It's not teaching every kid how to code. It's about building competency around these things, right? The literacy piece is just understanding how these systems work so that then if you are asked to or tasked with in the real world to work within a digital or technological infrastructure to solve a problem, you're able and you're nimble within that system to use the tools effectively, right? So yes, coding is important, and there are going to be kids that are on a computer science pathway that coding is going to be incredibly important for them. But I think it's clear that what we heard from feedback is this isn't just teach every kid how to balance a checkbook. Important, but it's more about building the competencies around what is financial literacy, how do you stay out of trouble financially, how is the financial system set up to benefit you, how can it get you in trouble, right? So building the larger understanding of these real world systems, because what I say is either students are competent in these and they can experience them when they get into the real world, or they are going to be subject to them. Because we cannot get out of our governmental or civic system. Technology is here to stay, and our financial system, we all engage with it every day in our lives. And so you've seen this timeline before, and we are still on time. As I mentioned last meeting, we collected feedback. We're bringing back characteristics and asking you, as Mr. Murphy mentioned, through resolution, for the authority to go and pursue vigorously indicators aligned to these characteristics as defined today, as I shared today, and come back to you in November with a set for your reflection and feedback, and then in December, come back with a final set of indicators that will inform the dashboard. Throughout that entire timeline, we will continue our proactive community and stakeholder engagement around these indicators and these characteristics. Not only did we do an open survey that anyone could fill out, but we also have targeted stakeholder group meetings really on a consistent basis, multiple times a week, as we continue to work, and that work will continue. And I just wanted to emphasize that work is not over now that we've identified the characteristics. We need their help identifying and elevating those headline metrics. And so with that, I will turn it over to you all for any questions or comments about the content.
Questions or comments for Jason or Ron? very good. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the resolution affirming the Indiana Graduates Prepared to Succeed Framework and Performance Dashboard. Do we need to read that?
Would one of you like to
I
review
read it because it was in my board materials, but
So it is online for anyone that wants to take a look at it and read it. I would say that what this resolution does, this is kind of a change in how we've looked at school data before at the state level. And so in this case, we're starting from what makes a successful graduate. That's what we're asking the board to approve here in the resolution. And then from here, we'll build indicators that are aligned to these things. Because what we found in the past is we've created these A through F systems, and this is not an A through F system as it has traditionally been. But we've created these A through F systems that have had incentives we didn't intend, while well intended, have not always been what we wanted, has not captured the full picture, and so on and so forth. And so this would give us a framework to continue the work and align it to this. So really what the resolution does at its core is for this board to approve those 5 elements, those 5 pillars that Mr. Sandlin just walked through, so that we can then begin, roll up our sleeves and begin the work of building those specific data points aligned to these 5 pillars.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion?
if I could just, and Brian, I just want to make sure that we're fully public about this. Now with the process, one, I applaud this, right? I really think, historically, I think we go back to pathways, and this is an extension, right, of where we started that work and now where we're ending up to begin to how we align everything, right? So that we can truly see what a student can do and should be doing. Now this process with this resolution, as you move forward, this will include discussions with people like my friend John O'Neill over there and those groups, right? I just want to make sure, I kind of knew that, but I want to make sure everybody understands that, right? That begins that piece of that so that we can look at what those indicators are.
Stakeholder input's going to be key.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, very good. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bess.
Yes.
Ms. DeLosa.
Yes.
Mr. Durham.
Yes.
Dr. Ernest.
Yes?
Dr. Freitas.
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau.
Yes.
Ms. Moat.
Yes.
Ms. Runchler.
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Thank you. Approved 9-0.
Great, thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
We really don't.